So good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us on the first in a series of Securex webinars that we're putting on for our clients. We are recording the webinar, just so as you are aware, and we will be kind of publishing it to those who haven't managed to make the call. So just in terms of the format, my name's Carl Henriksen. A lot of you know who I am, but I'm also joined by Mark Waldmeyer, who is our lead solution architect, who will take you through a demo of the SentinelOne platform. That's towards the end, and we'll also be doing a very exciting ransomware simulation. I say exciting for those of you who get excited about those things. Just to kind of kick off, really, I've got a few slides which I'll kind of go through, which just kind of help kind of set the scene in terms of SecureX. So, as always, I know a lot of you guys know who we are as an organization, but for those of you who don't, just a quick refresher. We are across what is now 4 locations. We have a very small representation in Australia, which I'm very proud of, and I've brought that into the mix. Emma, you'll know what I'm talking about. As a provider, we are 9001, 27001, and Cyber Essentials Plus certified. So it's very important for us to maintain these certifications. We've just been recertified for our ISO certifications as of a couple of months back, and we will recertify for Cyber Essentials Plus in February next year. As you guys all know, we're full 24/7, 365. We support thousands of users across various client sites and thousands of devices and endpoints, which are all managed by us. We invest quite heavily in industry platform and automation, and some of you may or may not know, but we are actually in the process of quite a major service management platform upgrade, which we will no doubt be communicating to our wider client audience over the course of the next kind of few weeks. In terms of headcount, we're currently sitting at a team of 82 people. The good news is we have been recruiting throughout 2020, and recruitment continues into 2021. In terms of some of our other certifications, I've mentioned ISO. We're also a Microsoft Gold partner. We hold 4 gold competencies around cloud productivity and data and small to mid-market. And we're hoping to turn that last silver one into gold by the end of the year, which is around content collaboration. And that's all the really good work we're doing around SharePoint and Teams and 365. We're also a Cisco Premier Partner, and Cisco is effectively our vendor of choice when it comes to network security and switching and routing and firewalls. We've had a pretty good run over the last kind of 2 to 3 years around awards and achievements. We've got a few more badges to add up there for 2020, but it's really great to be recognized by the industry for the fantastic work that we do at Oryx Align. Right, so that's a bit of background over there. So what I want to talk about now really is just a bit more about the increasing and evolving cyber security threat. So one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest cyber security challenges at the moment is that of endpoint security. And what I mean by that, it's the ability to protect the corporate network or corporate data from all the computers and the devices and the tablets that are connecting to it remotely. And as more and more people are working from home and more people are becoming very mobile, we have found that the number of devices have absolutely kind of sprawled, and they are really just now pretty much compounding what already is quite a big challenge. Signature-based and traditional-based antivirus software is no longer deemed to be as effective as what it was 2 to 3 to 4 years ago. Recent surveys which have been conducted have basically highlighted that up to 60% of endpoint attacks are effectively missed by traditional antivirus software. And that's kind of mainly due to the fact that viruses have now evolved quite rapidly. The word virus is actually quite dated as well, because nowadays we're seeing it's all really about malware. Malware traditionally used to be pretty non-malicious. It used to sit quietly on an endpoint or on a desktop and not do much until it was effectively controlled by an external kind of source. So what we're seeing at the moment is malware is on the rise, but similarly as well, malware is now becoming what's called polymorphic, which basically means it constantly changes its identifiable features in order to evade detection. And traditional AV solutions or antivirus solutions are not really equipped to deal with that effectively. So enter the world of EDR. So I've just put some quick descriptions on the slide deck in terms of what EDR actually is. It stands for Endpoint Detection and Response. And effectively, it's a newer expansion, an upgrade on what traditional endpoint security was. And there is greater focus on what is actually happening on the endpoint and inside the endpoint, more so than what antivirus effectively has been doing in the past, where antivirus can only block known threats coming in, but once malware is on the actual workstation, antivirus is absolutely useless in terms of what it can actually do. So EDR really provides you with additional visibility to look at, changing malware, advanced persistent threats, and it effectively deals with it at machine learning speed using all very clever automation and AI algorithms. I'm just going to pause there quickly. I just needed to say, if you guys have any questions at all, please put that into the chat of the webinar, and we'd be happy to kind of go through those questions towards the end. So in terms of what Oryx Align have done to keep up with the challenges and keep up with the threat landscape, we've launched a new service called SecureX. Now, it's worth mentioning, it's not a new product that we are bringing to market. We don't develop and code our own products. As you guys know, we look after all of your lovely IT, we look after your services and provide a managed service. But what we thought we would do is bring forward a new service, a new managed service, which consists of a couple of core components. And those components at the very core of that is an EDR platform called SentinelOne. So it's one of the leading cybersecurity vendors out there. We've looked at several before we actually decided on SentinelOne because it ticked all of the boxes we needed ticking. As well as SentinelOne, we have partnered with a company called Continuum, who are one of our existing kind of partners and who provide a global security operations center. They're a white label provider, which basically means they only interact with us in the back end. They are distributed across 4 global locations, 2 in the US, 2 in India, and they work directly with our NOC and with our service desk on a 24/7 basis. So there's no interaction between our SOC partner and our clients. Effectively, that's what we are positioned to do. And what we're leveraging from them is their huge capability to deliver monitoring and management of your endpoints, specifically the endpoints where we've got Securyx or SentinelOne installed. And it's worth noting, something which is very important, that our SOC partner has absolutely no access to any data on our client's endpoint. They work purely within the SentinelOne application and the dashboard, and they have no interaction with the user or contact with the user. In fact, they don't actually know who the user is. They're purely focused on the actual endpoint and what is happening on that endpoint in terms of threats. And again, working within the SentinelOne dashboard and application. So some of the SecureX service highlights that we have kind of wrapped in with the service. I've mentioned the managed EDR license, which is included with the service. We've discussed the endpoint monitoring and protection. And it's just worth noting again that even if we are not 24/7 support services to you guys particularly. I know some clients on the call we are delivering full 24/7 support for, but even if we are not delivering that, with Securex, we are effectively turning your endpoint support into full 24/7 support. But it's obviously around just the security support and management. If your endpoint breaks or your hard disk fails at 2 o'clock in the morning, our SOC is not going to pick up on that. It's purely to do with security alerts and vulnerabilities. As well as the items number 1 and 2, we are also integrating the native Office 365 and Azure ID protection kind of alerting and monitoring. And what that really is, these are native tools within Office 365 that we will configure as part of Securex to be alerted via the SOC and via our NOC and service desk as well. And those native tools are typically things that would flag up things like a typical travel. If you sign in London, for example, and then 3 hours later you sign in again in the US, where those kind of things look to be quite suspect. So Office 365 and Azure will pick up on those type of alerts, and they will alert us as well to that kind of strange behavior. As well as what we include as well is SentinelOne have got a ransomware guarantee. They're the only cybersecurity vendor out there at the moment who are offering this ransomware warranty, which in a nutshell means that if your endpoint does get encrypted with ransomware, they will effectively pay you £750 per endpoint affected to recover that endpoint. Now, that could be the paying of a ransom, which obviously we strongly advise not to do, or it can just be the recovery point to get your environment back to where it was prior to an infection. So like I mentioned, they're the only vendor out there that's currently doing that. If you want more information on that, it's freely available on the public domain. And I would encourage you to maybe have a look at how they structure their warranty. Obviously, you've got to make sure you've ticked all the boxes and your the application's installed correctly and it's been updated and it's been monitored and things like that. As well as that, for our clients that we are moving over from our Bitdefender antivirus platform that we are retiring in January, we are offering a full managed implementation and migration from one platform to the other platform, being SentinelOne. And as you know, we report monthly on all of our products, all of our services. Will be incorporating monthly security service and compliance reporting into the SecureX service. Just a bit on SentinelOne itself. So I won't go into too much detail because, like I said, again, there is a lot of information on the public or in the public domain. In its simplest terms, it's an autonomous platform, and that basically means it governs itself. It doesn't require any dependency on connectivity or cloud latency or human intervention and things like that. It's very much all about automation, machine learning, AI, and delivering what's called self-heal on the endpoints. So it's a very, very capable piece of software which has been developed, which effectively deals with any kind of risk or any kind of vulnerability in pretty much real time, or what they call machine learning kind of speeds. In terms of SentinelOne and Gartner, for those who are familiar with Gartner and what Gartner do in terms of the global kind of authority in terms of vendors, SentinelOne were rated one of the highest Gartner vendor in 2020 for EDR. It had an enormous amount of reviews by senior kind of authorities, and this is where kind of Gartner had pushed it up. And it's super important for us as an Oryx line, to make sure we are working with industry leading kind of vendors to deliver what would be a very, very important security service across all of your endpoints. Again, this information is freely available on the public domain. For those of you who are familiar with something called NIST, So NIST stands for the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And NIST has recently established a risk management framework that effectively are best practices, standards, and guidelines for managing cybersecurity related risks. So NIST is a US kind of born standard, but it's very quickly becoming a globally recognized kind of framework for best practices. And at its core, it's got 5 core pillars, which is identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And if you're basing your cybersecurity strategy according to the NIST framework, then you're doing pretty well in terms of what you need to kind of get across. The great thing with SentinelOne, and this was one of the main kind of selling features of SentinelOne, is that it aligns perfectly with the NIST framework in terms of how it identifies endpoint security, how it identifies threats, how it protects, detects, responds, and obviously recovers as well. So we'll show you later on in the demo how SentinelOne recovers from a ransomware attack by invoking something called rollback. Again, this is patented technology within the SentinelOne application. But in order to, the ability to recover quickly should a machine be impacted by ransomware is absolutely key. Obviously, if you can prevent the machine from being, infected in the first place, all so much better kind of thing. But we've got a lot of peace of mind knowing that the SentinelOne product, the core of SecureX, ultimately aligns directly with the NIST framework. A couple of slides, or 3 slides actually, on the SOC and our SOC partnership. So our SOC partnership are effectively segmented into 3 different organizational teams, which are spread globally across the US and across India. Research team, the analysis team, and then the incident response team. And each of those teams are built up of various roles, various skill sets, and various kind of qualifications. Just to elaborate slightly further on what they consist of. So, as the name suggests, the research team is really there to look at making sure all the products and the services are up to date, making sure us as partners are compliant in terms of running the latest versions of, looking at new research and development coming out of the industry. The analysis team really is where the action starts to happen. So the team over here are responsible for picking up all of the tickets, picking up all of the incidents, escalations, quite a breadth of skill set from all the way from first line analyst through to fourth line kind of analyst, team leads, NOC leaders, and things like that within the analysis team who arguably deal with the lion's share of the activity which kind of comes in. If an incident or if a vulnerability is then escalated further beyond the analysis team, it effectively goes into the security incident response team. And they would then take ownership of the actual issue, the actual incident, and they will be communicating directly with us in terms of the best course of action, communication, et cetera, and then, effectively deciding on the next steps in terms of how to overcome what that incident might be. But it's fair to say that the vast majority of incidents and vulnerabilities and threats are stopped way before they actually reach the incident response team. A quick example, really, I won't talk through all of this, but just a quick example of what that timeline looks like from the point of when an alert kind of comes in or a threat is detected. And like I said, typically it's stopped pretty much in its tracks due to the technology and the capability of the SentinelOne agent. But if it does run through SentinelOne and it does need to be dealt with in a different manner, because it might have spread quite quickly or it might not have been contained, then effectively it goes through from stage 1 and stage 2 in terms of threats being initiated, analysts looking at the threats, going to stage 3, 4, and 5, where we're looking to contain bringing in additional teams, understanding what needs to be done, working with us in terms of kind of how to potentially control that threat on the environment if it has moved beyond the endpoint, and then in theory, then it's agreeing with us towards the very end. How do we look to remediate? Do we invoke rollback, or do we remediate via other means? So that's just a very, very high level. There's obviously a lot of other stuff that happens between steps 1 through to step 6, but hopefully that kind of illustrates just roughly what that looks like. Very structured, very controlled, very governed in terms of the SOC operation. I wanted to show you guys some visuals. So these are the kind of things that we are seeing from our SOC partner. A lot of alerting, as you can imagine. Now, our service desk and our NOC teams, this is what they do day in, day out, especially our NOC teams. Ultimately, it's really around monitoring and dealing with alerts that are coming in from our client environments. Putting the security thing aside for a second, we are dealing with thousands and thousands of alerts which are coming in around, infrastructure's been up, internet connections being down, etc., etc. So taking on more of these alerting for us, it's very much kind of what we do. But the great thing with the partnership we have is that a lot of this alerting due to SentinelOne has already been actioned. And as you can see, some of the things which I'll highlight. So we would get highlighted that a new threat's been detected, on one of the laptops within our estate. It gives you really good detail about what the actual alerts, so what the vulnerability is, what action needs to be taken, and what action the SOC and SentinelOne have taken. So in this case, they've killed they've killed the vulnerability and they've quarantined it. And effectively, we have engagement with our SOC effectively, which is two-way engagement on any next steps which need to be taken. And then just some of the visuals in terms of the SentinelOne dashboard. This is what we see, as well as what our SOC partner sees, is just a bit more detail around the alert. And Mark will bring this to life in a few seconds when we go through the actual demo. But you can see over here what's been highlighted is that the application has killed the vulnerability in its tracks, and then any additional data we need, any additional resources we need around the vulnerability, they give you a link to actually go back online and actually find out a bit more around what the actual vulnerability actually is. So that really wraps up my slide deck. I might just kind of pause there for any questions if there are before I unshare my screen and hand back to Mark. Does anybody have any specific questions now? Great, fantastic. Right, Mark, over to you.
Great, thanks, Carl. Just want to say good morning to everyone for joining, who's joined. And kind of just following on from what Carl had shown you guys earlier, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that now, but basically what I wanted to start out with was a view of our portal. So it's sort of along the lines with the threat that Carl's actually just shown. This is really the sort of live portal that we would see. We've actually got the alert that was up on the screen a few moments ago. So what I've really done is just signed in. It's a very basic portal, as you guys can see. Not anything sort of too scary. The guys on the service desk have access to this, but as Carl says, it's really all driven by the guys on the SOC. And essentially, we can search for a device. So I've just searched for the computer name. We can see that come up here. And underneath here, you can get your sort of normal sort of stats that you would expect to see. You've got an actions sort of option under there. Obviously, a lot of these are sort of disabled. We obviously don't want to be rolling back things unnecessarily. But then what you can do is just go through and view any threats that device has had. So you can see the threat that came through. Obviously, it was a couple of weeks ago, but we can see that it was actually sort of deemed as malicious. It's been resolved. And if we click into that threat, we can actually see the detail that was up on screen as well. So Underneath here, we've really got three options, which is just the basic overview of the threat, just giving you machine information. If there's any notes, so sometimes when we're working with the SOC, we can have certain other threat indicators. So sometimes it might not be just one piece of malware; it could be a string of attacks that are going through the device, and any notes between us and the SOC. So on the service desk, we can add notes into there. The SOC can add notes as well to say, obviously, what the recommendations are. And we can delve into it a little bit further. So we can go through the explore pane, which there's not too much in here because it's quite a low level threat. But in the demo, I can show you a little bit more on that. And then also just the timeline. So in terms of this threat in particular, which obviously was a live one, we can see that it was kind of detected at, sort of 8:15. It's gone through all the automated kind of alerting, and further on, we've actually got the one of the guys on the SOC who's actually sort of picked it up. They've identified it as a true positive, and then kind of just resolved the issue by quarantine and well, it actually has quarantined and killed the the incident straight off the bat, but they've just actually sort of marked that as a threat that they've viewed. So that's generally the portal in a nutshell. Very basic, but does show us a lot of detail. And I know in my personal experience, there's a lot more detail than I've sort of seen on sort of other sort of antivirus products. But obviously with the EDR, there's a lot more to it. So what I wanted to do here really was just sort of run through a simulated demo, which as you can imagine, it's quite difficult for us to kind of do that live. We don't want to be introducing anything into our systems. We're running Sentinel-1 as well, so trying to set something up like this would have been quite difficult. But I'll just run through the motions of a simulated kind of ransomware attempt. Essentially, this is just going to be running a bit of ransomware called Ryuk, which is quite a prevalent ransomware. It's usually something that's initiated by a hacker that's already got access to the system. So it's something that a user would click on a link in and sort of start that off. Essentially, it runs through the network and just encrypts all the files that it can get hold of. In this instance, we're going to show you one of the methods that Sentinel-1 works on, which is the detect mode only. So this is something that we would normally use if we're doing a new install. So we'd want to kind of identify any false positives, anything that might be normal. So in the portal, we can go through the settings. We can set it as detect mode. We then kind of go through the dashboard. I'm going to just switch to the kind of machine that we're actually going to infect. Underneath there, we've got the malware on the desktop. We're just going to run it. As you can see, Sentinel-1 has actually detected it straight off the bat, but it actually has aligned the malware to still run. So we've managed to unzip it. We've managed to run the malware. If you have a look in the, you can see a number of processes are actually starting in the background. And after a couple of moments, we'll see that Sentinel-1's kind of detecting it. And we should see the files kind of start to be encrypted. So with Ryuk, what it really does is it encrypts the files, but also removes some of the snapshot options and the backup options on those files as well. So you can't, restore those as they are on the machine now. So in their current state, they're essentially there's nothing you can do with them. Ryuk's kind of aim is really to get people to pay the ransomware. So they give you a bit of information on how to do that. Obviously, it's not advised to do either. If we go back into the management console, though, we can kind of do very similar to what I was doing earlier. We can look at the sentinels, which are the agents, or just the incidents that have come up. And we can see that incident is showing in the dashboard as well. And then we can also see all the different sort of files that it's actually started to kind of, started to run in the background. Because this is a bit more of a prevalent threat, they know a little bit more information around it. So we can see where the sort of like the file structure that it's actually starting to run, the processes that it's running in the background. And because it's actually constantly running as we're going through this, that's going to increase. So we can see that it's opening up more and more processes in the background. It's starting to run things, shut down services. One of the aims of Ryuk is actually to continue running on the system as long as possible, because that way it can kind of encrypt more and more files, try and get across the network laterally as well. And essentially underneath the dashboard here, we can kind of see it just sort of running through the motions. Below that, you've got all the very technical details. So this is something that the SOC would kind of be analyzing, seeing if there's anything different with this variant, just going through all the files that it's actually affecting. And just, yeah, again, all the services that it's trying to run in the background. So you can see just by running that one zip file, there's quite a lot that's actually started in the background as well. So as I mentioned, as that threat's kind of running, the dashboard can be refreshed. So anything related to that kind of threat, it's going to show up under here. So as more and more processes kind of run, it's going to constantly kind of just show what that process is looking like. And just going to pause on this section here for a moment. So this is, as Carl was kind of mentioning earlier. So within the SOC, there is an option there in detect mode where if a ransomware is kind of detected and is across the machine, the SOC has the action to actually roll back the infection. So we can obviously quarantine and kill it. And then the rollback really sits around the volume snapshot and the sort of patented technology that SentinelOne uses to do that. The one thing I wanted to mention here was this is not something that they would just do in the background without any consultation with the client. So that would be run through the service desk. It's something that we would kind of, sort of, it would be through the ticket. There would be a bit of communication around rolling that back. And then if we needed to, we could obviously follow this process, which is really good and works pretty well. So once we've identified it as a true positive, within the dashboard, obviously we can't see any of the files that have been affected or actually read any of the information, but we can do the rollback, which then essentially just reverts the machine back to how it was with no threats detected. So very simple, very quick as well. So there's not really, because it's relying on the volume snapshot service, it's very quick to do. Obviously on one machine, if it went across lots more, it would take a little longer. So that's really in the detect mode. So we would run that kind of initially when we're going through the install, or if there was any kind of custom applications. I'm just really quickly going to go through the protect mode. It's not as long of a demo, but just to show you that if we go through the policies that we've got set and we change it to protect, what this is going to do is allow it to kind of immediately just quarantine anything that it deems is actually a known threat or sort of behaving in that way. So straight off the bat, if we try and unzip that application now or the payload and try and run it, it's picked it up, but it's gone straight back into a sort of no threats detected state because it just stopped that application from running. And so in that instance, we've not even gone as far as encrypting the files, which is obviously the better situation that we want. Again, we can go through the dashboard and we can see that it's being killed and quarantined straight off the bat. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So there's not too much to it, but yeah, essentially quite good in terms of in what it does and the detail that it goes into as well.
Great, thanks, Mark. Yeah, so just to kind of to summarize that, when we do the deployment, we will deploy in detect mode only initially, and then effectively we would move it to kind of protect mode. And as you can see, once it's in protect mode, it just will effectively stop things dead in its tracks, which is kind of what the real objective is. Thank you, Mark, for that. I'm not sure if there are any other questions. I know earlier you've asked a question in terms of how we deal with false positives. Is there a whitelist? Mark, do you want to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a whitelist function. So again, with the detect mode, what we can do is through the portal, if we see something that's gone through and it looks, it looks malicious, but actually we know that it's a custom application, we can mark that sort of as whitelisted. So it'll just mark that whole process tree essentially, and the SOC as well will be able to notice that that's a sort of whitelisted application or process or file. So we can definitely do that, as well as whitelisting IP addresses and the normal sort of stuff as well. So
great, thank you, Mark. If there are any other questions, please speak now, or forever hold your peace, really. But if there are no other further questions, Ola, did you have something else?
Well, just on the whitelist. So will that be something I'd have to ask you guys to whitelist?
It would be something that we would kind of work with you during the detect mode. So we would kind of pick it up as potentially something malicious, and it would come through as a normal sort of malicious looking alert. And then because we know, because of the process we'd go through, we'd be able to work with the service desk, alert you, as the client, to actually understand what that looks like and if it is something that should be running. If it is, then we would just automatically whitelist that through that process. But obviously, during the deployment mode, if there is anything that we kind of already know of, that's something that we could just whitelist straight off the bat. So if we know that there's a certain, certain processes, things running on servers as well, we can just whitelist that, during the deploy mode, really. But anything in the future, again, you could just go through the service desk as normal and just say, look, we're installing a new application and we'd like it whitelisted as well. So,
are you guys using this on site?
Are we using it ourselves or?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
All right. And that whitelisting process generally, the reason I asked, I've got two different things on my network at the moment, just because Trend Micro, we whitelisted stuff and it just didn't whitelist.
Right.
So it's one of those things, I want to be sure that the whitelisting works. I suppose the other question I did have was, did you look at Carbon Black or CrowdStrike?
Yeah, so we looked at CrowdStrike. We also looked at Cisco AMP. We didn't look at Carbon Black, but kind of CrowdStrike was the next nearest competitor, as well as Cisco anti-malware. CrowdStrike, a great application. Very, very big marketing budgets. They do shout about their product quite a lot, and there's nothing wrong with CrowdStrike at all, except it comes at a bit of a premium in terms of a price tag. So from an investment point of view, it's definitely a lot more than what the SentinelOne agent actually is.
Okay.
And I don't know if you noticed in the slide deck, SentinelOne is actually just sitting slightly above CrowdStrike in terms of user feedback, but it's a fantastic product for what it actually is. Hussein, you got your hand up?
Yes, Carl. Just a quick one for me. How long is the service running in detect mode before you move it into protection?
I think the short answer is as short a time as possible, really. The reason we put it into detect mode first is just effectively so that we don't have any issues with it blocking legitimate services and applications across the actual network. So I think it does vary from client to client. But the sooner we can get it into protect mode, the better. So I'd probably say it's probably a matter of days. Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. But ultimately, the ultimate is for it to go into protect mode as soon as it can.
Yeah, definitely, Carl. I'd completely agree with that. And I think just to add to that, one important point is even if it is in, quarantine and kill mode or protect mode, that's going to still raise an alert. And if it is a false positive at that stage, we can still go back in and whitelist it. So again, working with the SOC and the service desk, and consulting with the clients, we'd pick up quite quickly if that was false positive, and then just go through the motions of whitelisting it. So.
Olu, in terms of answer to your question, it does replace current AV, and yes, while the product is in detect mode, we would recommend that your current AV is left in situ, and then we would do a managed transition from one to the other. But as soon as SentinelOne is effectively in protect mode, there is no real purpose to have any other legacy product doing scans on the network. However, there are some organizations out there who run different antivirus products, different EDR products as a combination of just to be ultra safe. But I think we've demonstrated the capability of kind of SentinelOne. Were there any other questions? Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, everybody. I hope you found that informative and useful. If you do have any other questions, following on from the webinar, please feel free to come through to us, go directly through to your account manager, or come through to me. I do know most of you, so happy to answer some questions and any other information that you might need from the SecureX product. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a very good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.